Future Sense is a podcast edited from the radio show of the same name, broadcast on Bay FM in Byron Bay, Australia at bayfm.org. Hosted by Nick Jeans and well-known international futurist Steve McDonald, Future Sense provides a fresh, deep analysis of global trends and emergent technologies. How can we identify the layers of growth, personally, socially, and globally? What are the signs missed, the truths being denied? Science, history, politics, psychology, ancient civilizations, alien contact, the new psychedelic revolution, cryptocurrency and other disruptive and distributed technologies, and much more. This is Future Sense.
On Future Sense, it's 10:01, and we're talking today about the shadow, about reflections, about the cat who looks in the mirror. I'm sure you've seen one of those videos and freaks out totally at their own reflection, and how humans, in a sense, this is where we're at right now, and how we better take a different view of that reflection in the mirror.
That's right, during this time of change. And if we look at life as a process of self-discovery, so really life and consciousness is all about looking in the mirror and learning about ourselves, it fits with the teachings of all the great wisdom traditions. Really, you find this theme running through all of the wisdom traditions throughout the ages. And for those of you out there who might not know what a wisdom tradition is, we're really talking about long-term teachings that have operated for many years in parallel to what we see as the formal structured religions we've had for the last couple of thousand years, except the wisdom traditions are much, much older. They've been going for much longer. They've often been suppressed by the structured religions because basically for political reasons, to allow the churches to empower themselves. And there are some very constant themes which run through these long-term teachings, and one of them is this idea of reality simply being a process of self-discovery, and many of the great traditions they suggest that this reality was created in order that the creator of this reality could know itself through us. And strongly aligned with the idea of unitive consciousness. In other words, that all consciousness is manifestation of a single overarching consciousness which runs through everything. So the idea of looking in the mirror is very central to that whole perspective on reality itself. And what did you have there, Nick, you were going to mention?
Yeah, well, I related to this, one of the things I came across, and thanks very much to our news show on Thursdays, This is the Climate Crisis with Michael Shaw and Michelle Walter, middays on Thursday. News shows had done 2 episodes, and they pointed to the whole area of deep adaptation, and particularly positive deep adaptation. And an article on that page, which you can go to Facebook, by Paul Jepson, I found very interesting, and it talks about narratives, and I think this is actually what we're talking about in a sense here, because narratives, of course, matter. And I'm going to read a little bit of this. Narratives establish the architecture for the telling of stories about the state of the world and how we should act. During the mid-20th century, a powerful environmental narrative emerged that has shaped institutions and cultural understandings of our relationship with nature, the planet, and different actors in society. At its root, this narrative adopts a simple state, cause, consequence structure. Nature is in crisis due to human fecundity, greed, and ignorance, and catastrophe looms. The activist generation of the 1970s populated this narrative with villainous, but also innocent and heroic characters, and called on governments to act to regulate the perpetrators of harm and for companies to change their immoral ways. And of course, this is still in action as we speak. Many of the activist movements around the world are still acting out of this place. Not that it's wrong; it's just one way of approaching the problems on the planet. This narrative is powerful and has achieved much, but it mobilizes action through a combination of anxiety and blame. The relentless retelling of doom and gloom stories may have alienated many ordinary people from the environmental movement. The issues seem so big that people feel powerless to make a difference within the constraints of their everyday lives. So that part will come back to the article with the positive side of this, but that's pretty much what we're saying here, is this notion that we're seeing the doom and gloom, the problems, the anxiety and blame, the guilt also that we feel because of the state of the world and things, and we look at that reflection of ourselves in the mirror and we don't like it. We're not responding very well to that overall.
And this is a classic dynamic during times of paradigm shift. If we look at the structure that Gray's identified in the evolution of human consciousness, we have this mirroring double helix kind of pattern where we live through a layer which is focused on us as individuals, ourselves, and we're looking to the outside world, and we tend to be driven to want to change the outside world to suit what we want, and then we alternatively move from there into a communally oriented paradigm, way of being human, where we suddenly become aware of changing ourselves to fit with what the outside world requires. And so we're bouncing backwards and forwards between individual existence and communal existence, and alternatively we get those two different perspectives on ourselves. We get a perspective of ourselves as being almost in a godlike position of being in control of the material world, or wanting to be in control of the material world.
We're the masters of our universe. We're masters of dominion over all things on the planet and all that sort of stuff.
Exactly, and doing whatever we will. And then alternatively, we see ourselves immersed in community and feel the need to want to change ourselves to fit with what the community and our surroundings require of us. And that swapping backwards and forwards each time brings a more expanded perspective of who we are and what our place is in the world. And through this gradual expansion, it's like each step along that path, we get a clearer view in the mirror of who we actually are in relation to all of those things.
Yeah. And again, coming back to mental health, because of course these things reflect very much in our mental health as individuals in society. And I note in this same article from Paul Jepson, he talks about these stories, these narratives, that they go through the same kind of structures as mental health recovery. And that's very simply these four narrative components. First of all, the first stage, despair, anguish, and hopelessness. And the second, awakenings and reassessments. And the third, then, decisions to act, often in the company of others, as you're saying, perhaps, depends where you're at. And then leading to the recovery of hope and wellness. So to really see the human situation as a psychological process, I think is very useful, is very important.
It is, absolutely. Yeah. And I was talking about the movement through the layers. It's absolutely predictable in the first tier of consciousness, so in these first 6 layers of consciousness, which take us up to and including the emerging paradigm, postmodern relativistic. It's perfectly normal that once we shift perspective and we look back at where we've been, we have this massive rejection, and we see it as distasteful, unpleasant, not wanted, even to be eradicated in many cases. And we're seeing that very strongly now, where there's a strong movement to collapse capitalism, really, which is operating largely through the climate movement also, where we're painting everything that we've ever done in the previous paradigm is absolutely wrong, has to be completely written off, throw the baby out with the bathwater, those sorts of things. And of course, there's no questioning that change is necessary. There are many, many reasons why we ought to change, and we ought to shift into a communal way of living to solve all of the problems that we've created by living the previous way. And this is a normal dynamic. It happens every time we go through a paradigm shift. And by understanding these patterns and by understanding the process, as you say, of what's going on, we can get deep insights into how to actually work consciously with the process, rather than being like the unconscious cat looking in the mirror, not realizing what it's looking at and realizing that it's actually looking at itself, and then getting instant feedback in the mirror of its reaction to itself. So if it gets afraid, it's seeing a cat that's afraid. If it goes to attack itself, it's seeing a cat that's trying to attack it. And this kind of unconscious reflection is what's feeding a lot of human behaviour right now, which is very much driven by fear, and consequently resulting in illness, depression, and those sorts of things, and a sense of hopelessness. I think is growing as well at the moment.
And of course, there's nothing here that's wrong. I mean, this is a process, and this is a stage along the way. You could argue, hopefully, that individuals and society moves out of, but you will need to have that response probably before you start to move to a more conscious and reflexive response to that reflection in the mirror. But it does take a bit of work, and I think we've been disencouraged and disempowered in a sense through media, certainly through fake news, which is making it very difficult to actually stand up and say, well, I see the truth and I believe in this truth, I want this, or I don't believe in this. It's hard to actually know what you're facing, what the reflection actually means now. I think this is the trouble that many people have got. What does it actually mean that we're seeing this here and we can't make sense of it? And it doesn't relate directly to my reality, other than the fact that I'm not getting any more pay anymore, that my services are being cut, that the arts department of the Arts Ministry of Australia doesn't exist really anymore. So we're seeing all sorts of reflections that many of us do not like at all, and our natural tendency is to do what we've done before, and that's to fight or to go into fear or flight. But we're looking now at a different approach to this reflection.
Yeah, and the motivation for change is being ramped up by this regressive value search, which again is another natural response to things not working very well as we look backwards to old ways and okay, let's try those out, let's see if they'll work this time, and consequently we're seeing a lot of political action which seems to be taking us, and it is actually taking us backwards in a very, very natural evolutionary dynamic that is like pulling back the elastic band on a slingshot to create sufficient tension to give us forward momentum once again. And it's only by seeing how things are at the moment and feeling like they really are wrong and need to be changed. It's only through that tension that we will be motivated to bring real change. And constructive, progressive change.
And of course, as we mentioned Carl Jung before, whose work on the shadow, of course, is exemplary and probably the really beginning of all this kind of work and looking at the double side of the human being. And you might recall the book Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, of course, written by Robert Louis Stevenson in 1886, looked at this two sides of one personality, that a human being has a shadow personality which can gain dominance over the more functional personality. And in this situation that we're in now, I think there's a lot of people who hide these negative qualities of themselves because we are seeing them more and more. I suggest we're seeing them more and more. It's becoming obvious to us at this time that where we fail, for many of us, but instead of actually taking that in and holding that in and starting to have that sort of reflexive relationship to that experience, what we do is to project it out, of course, and this is how the shadow works. If you don't own it, if you don't see it, if you can't accept it and start working with your own shadow, you will project it out. And
you see it in the mirror.
You see it in the mirror. And we're putting it out, of course, on all sorts of people, refugees and Indigenous people and the list goes on and on. And this is the only way at the moment that many people on the planet are actually dealing with this very difficult reflection. But it's time for a change there.
That's right. Sometimes I talk about the old paradigm as being like a combustion engine that's reaching its end of life, and as an engine wears down, through hours and hours and years of use, the metal starts to wear down, and so the seals, the air seals in the engine start to break down. But just before that happens, the wearing down reduces the friction, and so the engine will run faster and produce more power just before it breaks. And at the moment, particularly through social media, we're seeing this acceleration of wanting to project just the perfect image of ourselves and nothing more through Instagram, the influencers, as you say, through Facebook and through all of these other social media apps that we have. And we should expect that acceleration to continue right up until the blowout time, which is when the big realization comes and you actually have to look in the mirror and face what's there.
Yeah, tough times ahead, but positive in the end, I feel that we are moving towards a great regeneration on this planet, but possibly not in my lifetime, but hopefully.
Oh yes, definitely in your lifetime.
Excellent,
yes.
fantastic.
No, I've seen the schedule.
Excellent. Yeah, you have to. We'll give you that when you join our special club, which we'll give you details of later on. You get the inside information from Major McDonald on exactly what's going to happen on the planet in the next 50 years.
That's right. And if you join this week, you'll get a set of steak knives.
Ooh. Well, you shouldn't be eating steak day because apparently we're supposed to be vegan. Although I am never going to give up honey. I am sorry. You're on Bay FM. It's 10:15 a.m. Thanks for joining us. No text today, which is unusual, but perhaps you are going deep and looking at yourself rather than just throwing stuff back at us. Perhaps you're taking it in and having a good look at the reflection in the mirror.
For all of you out there, strangers in a strange land, you're grokking Future Sense here on Bay FM.
thanks for your texts. Come and just go through them. We are in awe and in process, mate. Love your work. Thanks, Casman. Conrad from down there listening in Melbourne. G'day, Conrad. Putting in my order for the steak knives.
Wonderful. We'll just put you on the list here.
And David, who's a regular contributor too, said Stephen Fry made me an astrological atheist long ago when he commented that space is three-dimensional and so our linear picture making of it is no more real than tea leaf story making. And yet, we humans are in essence storytellers in creation and meaning. So all good, brothers, project and create away. Yes.
Stephen Fry needs to brush up on his science because there are way more than 3 dimensions.
Exactly right. Yes, 11 at least. And Rod has written, hey guys, sorry I've been busy looking in the mirror in terms of not texting in. Thanks for that. And lastly, from CT, this is interesting. Yeah, hi guys, great show. Just throwing it out there, but couldn't this whole thing, our consciousness, the universe, everything, just be one huge synchronicity? It's just one more complex than we can ever understand. It's just one way more complex than we can ever understand. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that sounds reasonable.
It does sound reasonable.
Yeah. That was the most complex version of consciousness that Graves documented in his research, held the perspective that one can never know the ultimate truth. As a human.
The never-ending quest.
We just don't have the capacity to grasp the enormity of it all.
I mean, it's very exciting, that particular perspective, just as a sideline. When you introduced me to Graves' work, and I came across that, and of course the book, The Never-Ending Quest, which is a very thick piece of summary of his research, just the notion that we don't have to get anywhere. It's kind of relieving, really. I mean, many people who are seeking enlightenment, seeking a sort of end point, that's their business, and it's an aspect of being human to a degree, but the idea of letting that go is kind of rather freeing. That's what it was for me anyway.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. You know, it points us to appreciating the process rather than, sweating on getting somewhere. And that doesn't mean that we're not going somewhere. We are. We are changing continuously.
And we're not the same. I think it's amazing how people still think that we are repeating the same things over and over again. And of course, there's an aspect of that always, but we're not going round in a circle. We're not doing the same stuff. The world is far more complicated than it was 50 years ago, 20 years ago, and certainly 200 or 2,000 years ago. It's just a different paradigm that we're living in right now.
That's right. And it comes down to where you're at in terms of your own consciousness development, what perspective you're taking on the world, and whether you are capable of taking a perspective that has multiple dimensions.
Yeah.
Whether you're seeing the world in 2D or 3D or 4D or 5D or etc. Yeah. Indeed. And were you talking about Carl Jung there? Or?
Well, I was going to mention this because in this article that I was looking at, I've been using a bit today to quote a couple of things from it about some of Jung's work about the shadow. He's asked at one point, is there a technique to integrate the shadow? And I guess that's really relevant in the sense that so many of us keep on seeking techniques. Nothing wrong with that, ways to get to that point. But in terms of integrating the shadow, he said, Carl Jung himself, there's no generally effective technique for assimilating the shadow. It's more like diplomacy or statesmanship, and it's always an individual matter. I think that's certainly true. First, one has to accept and take seriously the existence of the shadow. In other words, you look at that cat in the mirror and that cat goes, oh, that's a reflection, that's a shadow. Second, one has to become aware of its qualities and intentions. It takes an acute self-awareness. This happens through conscientious attention to moods, fantasies and impulses. And third, a long process of negotiation is unavoidable. And of course, this is written, 70, 80 years ago, and we could contest some of that indeed, but relevant nevertheless.
And written largely from a layer 6 perspective, so a relativistic postmodern perspective, which is very much about turning the camera around and looking at ourselves. I mean, apart from doing that in real life with our phones, we're doing it.
Why don't do that?
We're doing it in a sort of metaphorical sense as well, in that this new way of being human is asking us, directing us. It's coded for introspection. And one of the documented, the shadow aspect of this 6th layer is layer 3, which is egocentricity. So it has as part of it an egocentric, a self-centered viewpoint, and that's necessary to enable this introspection, this self-examination, and for us to undertake a process of integrating things from our past, which still require integration and shoring up our being to provide this solid platform for the leap into second tier. Because while we're standing on a shaky platform, we're just not going to make that big leap into second tier successfully. So what Jung's saying is very correct. I mean, it's from a particular perspective.
Yeah.
And if we wanted to expand on that, we could pop into a sort of a multi-dimensional approach where we might engage in self-development activities which enhance our multi-dimensional perspective, and these usually come from some kind of altered state work,
yes,
which could include psychoactive medicines, but it could also be done in some other way.
Meditation, yoga.
And what those allow us to do is to have an expanded sensory perception, to sometimes get directly in touch with these aspects of ourselves as if we are, standing in a multidimensional mirror, and through that direct experience achieved in those altered states, we can have very, very effective and compressed processes, of seeing, acknowledging, dealing with the shadow.
Yeah, and I guess because more and more of us are capable of having those compressed experiences, more rich content in a shorter space of time, because our capacity is growing for many people.
Exactly, it is, yeah. I'll talk in a moment. We might take a break first, but I want to talk in a deeper esoteric way about some of that multidimensional sensory awareness and some experiences that I've had of approaching what you might call the cosmic mirror in a multidimensional way.
Very good. Just a couple of other texts have come in, with a flurry of texts in the last 10 minutes or so.
Okay.
I think this is also from David. He says, P.S. What matters only is if the storytelling, either by astrology, God, or tea leaves, is unveiling of a reality. So yes, if it's unveiling reality, then wherever access point that you find is valid. And he says, love Monday morning story time with Nick and Steve.
Thank you.
A couple of other things too. This one too. How do we join RD? Is this organisation taking newbies yet? And RD, and you spell it correctly. I'm impressed.
Thank you for that. Very good question. We're still in the process of getting ourselves organised, and sometime soon I'll get an email list up on the website so you can join that.
Yeah.
We do have future plans to create a member-based network, and we need some serious funding to get to that point. But in the meantime, we will provide opportunities, and we'll announce that on air when we've got a chance for you to sign up. So thank you for the question.
You're tuned to Future Sense with Nick Jeans and Steve McDonald. Engage, emerge, activate, and spiral up.
Thanks for all of your texts. You can still text in 04 3734 1119, and we're talking about the reflection, the shadow, yours and the whole of the planet, in fact, for that matter, and where we're going with that. Yeah.
Exactly. I said just before the break that I wanted to talk about some experiences that I've had in altered states over the years, and offer a way of making sense of everything. There are a couple of assumptions underlying this, and of course there are always assumptions underlying our perspectives, and it's good to acknowledge those. But these assumptions that I'm going to name now are teachings from the wisdom traditions which have been around for a long time, really, as long as recorded history. And they are that we exist in a field of unitive consciousness, so all that we experience, including ourselves, is one infinite and complex field, and that this field of consciousness seeks to know its own nature. And if you work on those assumptions, then you also must work on the understanding, or from the understanding, that we are by definition an aspect of a facet of this unitive field, and consequently we are part of the co-creation process ourselves, and so we are not having something done to us, but we are participating in this unitive action of knowing oneself. And my personal experiences around that in very, very deep altered states have been around the feeling of the experience of approaching a mirror, and the mirror itself appears to be brilliantly lit, and it can be in the early stages of having these experiences, and I'm talking about multiple experiences here, that light can seem too bright, too harsh to actually approach, and there's a tendency to want to pull away from it. And again, you can relate all of this back to the cat seeing itself in the mirror, right? It's like, what the fuck was that?
Language warning.
You know, through practice and achieving a sense of stillness, being able to move closer to that mirror, and this fits with the concept of what is known as the reflexive universe. So a reality that reflects itself back to itself. And this is captured in traditions that teach around cause and effect processes. The word karma is used in the Indian traditions. Yes. This idea that every action has an equal and opposite reaction, just like looking at yourself in the mirror. You know, whatever you do, you see done back, or returning as an echo. And so the closer, if you are in a state of discombobulation, then the closer you get to this mirror, the more you will feel that. So whatever state you are in, the more it becomes enhanced as you approach this, what I call the cosmic mirror, right? And so the only way to really get close to it is to be in a state yourself that is going to feel okay as it's amplified. So in other words, a state of peace and stillness. And I've found through over a number of different experiences that I was able to come closer to the mirror by achieving that peace and stillness. But I had to go through this process of firstly recognizing that this was a kind of a mirror that I was approaching. So there had to be that basic understanding, and then through a process of learning, realizing that whatever I was being was going to be amplified as I moved closer to this. And these kinds of experiences that we can have in altered states are simply a magnified version of everyday life. So every day you walk out the door and you meet yourself in various guises, you know, and not just in and through other people, but in every aspect of reality. If you subscribe to these assumptions that I'm talking about, we live in a unitive field where everything is ultimately one thing and we're all connected, and it seems to be holographic in nature, so you can learn about the nature of yourself through everything that you encounter through your own consciousness. And our capacity to do that, of course, grows and expands as we grow and expand through these various layers of consciousness, and particularly moving into second tier consciousness, where we get a sudden expansion of multidimensional awareness, and a much greater multidimensional awareness than we've ever had before. And we seem to have greater visibility, that we don't seem to, we actually do have greater visibility of human nature in all of its previous forms that we personally have grown through. We get to see the underlying patterns, these layers like bubbles that we've moved through, nested bubbles of different ways of viewing the world, different ways of making sense of reality, different ways of understanding ourselves. And so the revelation that comes with the second tier transition is really quantum in nature. You know, it's massive and beyond any shift in terms of its magnitude and its detail and its complexity, beyond any shift that we've ever grown through before in this experience of being human.
Good, interesting text just on this topic as you're speaking, I think from Ed. Mr. Ed, he calls himself. Lovely having a talking horse listening to the show.
Absolutely. And he can text as well.
Yeah, there you go. Isn't this path or journey of spiritual seeking the ultimate cosmic joke? As when we remember or become aware again of what we are made of, or essentially are, all the looking outside of ourselves has been right under our noses all along.
Exactly, by design.
By design, and that's the missing piece. By design. This is what you said earlier.
Exactly.
Whatever created us, however we are created, we created ourselves, whatever it is.
Yes.
The idea being that we created ourselves in this way in order to see ourselves and to experience ourselves.
That's right.
The purpose of creation itself.
That adage of know thyself is embedded in all of the Western traditions. The ancient temple of Apollo at Delphi, it was inscribed above the portal at the entrance to the temple.
Yes.
You'll find it in every long-term tradition.
And I think another thing I was going to quote when you were talking about going outside of the mores of society, in a sense, with altered states, and there are many ways to do that. We talk about that on this show.
Actually, when you say going outside the mores of society, if you look back at the history of society, you'll find that that's been the norm. Okay, we've been living through an anomaly where it's been suppressed. Yeah.
Good point. And I was going to also mention that the tribal traditions, the indigenous traditions, the wisdom traditions are also governed, in fact, by Pluto. We talked about Pluto astrologically earlier. But this piece here on the shadow also says, no matter the approach we adopt to properly integrate our shadow, it's necessary to behave in ways which run counter to the mores of society and our own conscious moral compass. Most of our shadow qualities, after all, were repressed into our unconscious because we believed they were unacceptable, either socially or according to our family or peers. And I guess that's, certainly more recently, as you're saying, this is the truth, is that a lot of these investigations of the past have become untenable in the last 50, 100, couple of hundred years under the paradigm that's been governing us.
Yeah, and one of the key links in there that has been suppressed has been self-inquiry through direct personal experience, and particularly spirituality and religious belief systems structured around direct personal experience, and with basically the last 2,000 odd years when we've lived through this period of politically motivated religious structures, they have disconnected us from that direct experience for control purposes, basically. Basically obliging us to go through a representative of the structured organisation in order to have some knowledge of self, rather than gaining it directly through the kinds of practices that were suppressed by the churches and that have been in existence forever.
Yes, exactly. And of course, along with that, as you're speaking, I'm thinking of things like rites of passage in indigenous communities right throughout time and space, and how they have been suppressed or disappeared in most cases, and replaced by some of the sort of more traditional religious formations, taking all those traditions, but also the new sort of rites of passage of, I guess, a bunch of young guys getting out and getting drunk. So we sort of disappeared that other, that deeper, that more profound, reflexive reflection of journeying into a change at various times in our life, which is necessary, the change from childhood to adolescence, for example, and so on.
We have, and part of our movement forward into this new paradigm in the rebuilding of local community is by necessity rebuilding structures, recreating structures within society, so we can do these things in full knowledge of what we're doing, and supported by people who understand the nature of these processes and can guide us through those, as we've had. If we go back to ancient civilizations, we had massive structures like that built into society, which have been lost in more recent times.
Yeah, indeed. Eckhart Tolle says, according to another texter here, we are not our mind, we are not our emotions, and whenever we manifest negative thoughts or emotions, we should remember this, become aware that these emotions and thoughts are not us, and be the ever-present witness in the now. Another approach to take, and of course Eckhart Tolle has been very successful in drawing attention to that self-reflective nature to a degree, for sure.
Yeah, very true. As you're talking there, you're talking about Pluto again, you made me think about Mickey Mouse. And
of course,
his dog was called Pluto, and the dog is a bloodhound, right? Sniffing out the truth. Yeah.
Very good. Lovely. We'll take one more break here, and we'll come back to wrap up here on Bay FM. And we're still receiving your texts. They're coming in thick and fast. Thanks for that. Really enjoy getting and responding to your texts here.
You're resonating right now on Future Sense with Steve McDonald and Nick Jeans.
Thanks for the last couple of texts. Someone has written, I was born in 1961 with Saturn-Jupiter conjunction in Capricorn. That's right, back then, 38 years ago. Oh, no, it's wrong, 50-something years ago. So those of this generation, of his or her generation, it's Joe, can expect some massive personal revelations at this time. We didn't get to say that, but absolutely the different, these conjunctions, particularly these outer planets that are occurring in Capricorn at the moment and in the next year or so, it's been going on for a while, they affect different generations in different ways. That generational aspect is extremely important because they touch different aspects, different parts of each individual collective generation, and that's a fascinating topic in and of itself, how that's emerging as we go forward. So yes.
Indeed, very interesting. I just want to summarise with, I guess, lessons we can learn from the cat in the mirror. And the first lesson we can learn from the cat in the mirror is whatever you're doing and being is going to come right back at you, basically. Yeah. It takes that, I guess, first realisation that you're actually looking in a mirror before you can work with that reflective dynamic that we seem to live immersed in this reflexive universe. And so what it points to is whatever you want to experience in life, then you need to cultivate that internally, and that points towards doing regular inner work, some kind of daily personal meditative practice, which allows you to cultivate inner peace and stillness, and that certainly is again a key aspiration of this emerging paradigm at the moment, is seeking inner peace. There's no doubt about that. That's well documented in Graves's writing.
I think that's always been talked about sort of cleaning the mirror or wiping the dust from the mirror, so getting a more real, exact and immediate reflection going on there, not a sort of clouded one, so to speak.
That's right, Mr. Sheen.
Mr. Sheen.
And I guess another thing we can learn
not a product endorsement.
The cat. Another we can learn from the cat in the mirror, another thing, is that be cautious of being influenced by knee-jerk reactions, fear responses, panicked reactions, and be aware of any time you might be projecting your fears onto others, and be wary of personalities who appear in the media urging everyone to be fearful and to panic. Because if everyone panics, then guess what? That's exactly what's going to come straight back at us. And we know from our basic understanding of human nature and our physiology that we don't work the best when we're panicked or when we're fearful. In fact, it shuts down our capacity to know and perceive. And we fall back into instinctive knee-jerk reactions. So it's really not desirable, particularly at a time when we are clearly facing many, many complex challenges in the world. The very best thing we can do, first and foremost, is to achieve inner peace so that we can then very, very consciously act in ways to make the world a better place for everybody. And since we live in a reflexive universe and work in it, I guess, whatever we're being will be reflected back to us. And so the work starts right here at home.
Absolutely. Another question, because as we evolve, do we come to know ourselves anew, just what you're saying, or are we just only unveiling ourselves as we've always been? And he says, and my sense is as anew as never been before, and yet it seems more and more as home. I guess what you're saying there is the new is new, but it actually feels like home. That's interesting, isn't it? Because there's a truth to that for sure.
Yeah, there is. And I guess it relates to this idea of an expanded perspective. As we grow into something new, we achieve an expanded perspective. So what we considered to be us, me, at an earlier level of development is smaller than the me that I experience now. And I guess it's both and, really.
Yeah.
We are experiencing ourselves as something new, but we're also experiencing more than we ever experienced before, and so we get to know ourselves from a much, much larger perspective. And ultimately, if you kind of extend it out to infinity, we're moving towards knowing ourselves as this infinite, complex field of consciousness that we are a facet of. Which
will enable us to find much deeper system solutions to the issues on the planet that we currently really don't have the answers for, even though we think we do, in a sort of narcissistic way, I would suggest.
Indeed. And, I can't underestimate the worth of altered state experiences which allow us to have peak momentary encounters with our larger self, and then we do come back. But I like to say, when we have these peak expanded experiences, it's a little bit like inflating a balloon, and then we come back and the balloon never quite goes back to being as small as it was before. There's always a little residual stretch from those experiences, so they're very, very useful, however you might be inclined to
So
achieve them.
look for your residual stretch, folks.
Exactly.
We'll have to leave it there. That's it for the show. Thanks for joining us here on Future Sense. So check it out, futuresense.it, as a portal to our podcasts, also on iTunes, on the iTunes app and other portals. And please keep on joining us and writing and expanding.
Exactly.
Thanks for
Thank you.
being with us. Thanks, Steve.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Future Sense, a podcast edited from the radio show of the same name, broadcast on Bay FM in Byron Bay, Australia, at bayfm.org. Future Sense is available on iTunes and SoundCloud. The future is here now. It's just not evenly distributed.